Hello my friends, I'm Rich Larson and I'm the IRC Tire Guy. Today we're continuing our 2-stroke, 4-stroke electric technique series. This has been a lot of fun and now we're getting into the hard enduro situations. Now, we're not gonna dive in full bore, getting into a whole loop, trying to push this electric bike to the limit. That being said, we are going to get into some technical riverbeds today and talk about the tractability, the control, kind of the changes that I make from 2-stroke to 4-stroke, then to electric, showing you guys the intricacies in technique in these technical riverbed situations. It's going to be somewhat slick and kind of learning the differences between the bikes is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to do it. I think we should just jump right into it with some technical riverbed sections. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get going. What we're going to do here is just kind of work our way through these sections. I'll kind of play around, talk about what I'm feeling on the 2-stroke, talk about the specific techniques, and then we'll just switch bikes. But yeah, that being said, one of the key things is as I come through a section, I've got a waterfall here in front of me, and I'm thinking about putting as much power down before the obstacle, finding momentum before the obstacle. The obstacle is the waterfall, and you don't want to be revving in the obstacle because you're going to run a higher risk of spinning tires. So we're really going to focus on finding the momentum here. Now, I like to initiate momentum with the clutch in, finding kind of that movement. Then I want to get as far out on the clutch as possible before the obstacle. That's going to give me the most tractable control, is kind of getting off of that clutch. The more you fly the clutch, bringing it in and out, the more likely you're going to be to break traction. So I'm going to try to get off of the clutch as I come into the waterfall, reload. You'll hear the RPM come up, loading that flywheel, then transitioning to minimum as I go up through low RPM here. You can hear it, low. Then I try to get off the clutch, low RPM, holding balance here. You can see each time I put the power down before each little waterfall. Trying to keep your feet on the pegs is a key piece. That allows for more tractable control. Obviously that takes a lot of practice with trials, etc. Let's try it in a different way. So now what we're gonna do here is we're gonna cut through this section slow pace, just so you guys see kind of some good training that you can do in a very minimal waterfall section. I like to cut through stuff at slow pace sometimes, just to practice. Even here, most riders would try to keep their front tire in the river the whole time. And what happens with that is the rear tire tracks below and gets closer to this side. And usually what ends up happening is a spin. So you can see, I run my front tire deep in every turn. That's such a key piece. I'm thinking in terms of where my rear tire is. If my front tire was in the trail, my rear tire would be almost all the way up against this rock here. And it's higher on this side, so I'm gonna be digging a hole if I run my front in the trail. If I run it deep, puts me in a better position to then be able to pivot. Because as you can see, my rear tire is already in the river. Low RPM, keeping the bike in the bottom. Same thing here. Boom. I run it deep, turning this direction because I'm going to set up for this little waterfall here. I like to pull the bike back, finding all the momentum I can. Now, this is the unstuck technique that we talked about 4 or 5 episodes ago. The key piece to this technique in a waterfall situation is trying to minimize the amount of drive with your body. Obviously, if you drive too much, you're gonna lose that rear tractable control on the way up. This is a somewhat steep waterfall. It's obviously slick. There's moss underneath it. So I have to be very controlled with the delivery of power, but also doing my best to hold my hips back a little bit more as I drive up through this obstacle. Hips back. I'm gonna drive a little bit, but then you'll see me kind of return to that hips back position and almost wheeling the whole way up. Just like that. I've set myself up in a good position. I always take a glance below
you saw there, I looked down, saw a little bit of a rock, kicked that rock out, reset, same thing, hips back, a little bit of a drive, then release of the clutch, and then I try to return to those hip back position to maintain traction as I move up this next little step. You can see nice and smooth. Power before. Front and rear brakes on the down. Balance on the down. Always trying to keep it in control. Let's try it on the dry spot. The dry spot is a little bit steeper. As you can see, I'm at a bigger disadvantage here, and I'm not gonna be able to stop halfway up. I basically gotta get my rear tire all the way up to there. So I'm looking for maximum momentum. You can see I find as much drive as I can. I'm gonna drive my way forward, release the clutch, then get those hips back to hold traction up over the top. Honestly, I mean, even this kind of granite that's polished is pretty dang slick. Ooh. You can see, as soon as I started to feel that tire slip, I immediately tried to pull that clutch in and reduce the throttle just to get the tractable control to get my front tire past this gap. So if again, we're aiming with the rear tire. If I'm aiming with my front tire, my front would be in this waterfall and my rear would still be on the ledge. But because I'm focused on getting my rear tire as deep as I can, doesn't matter if it's in a switchback, a corner, a waterfall, focus on getting the rear tire deep helps every single time. This kind of stuff is truly so valuable. You can sit and play on one waterfall section and really learn a lot about a bike, learn a lot about where your characteristics are within body position, movement, control, throttle, clutch. Everything together comes into play in sections like this. And like I said, it's fun to kind of sit around and goof, take it piece by piece, learn how to hit it in different ways. Let's switch over to the 4-stroke. All right, guys, we're on to the 4-stroke. We're gonna be playing around again on this waterfall section, focusing on how tractable it is, the precision movements. We're gonna load that flywheel coming into this first waterfall, and then we'll kind of adapt over to the more technical side like we did on the 2-stroke. We wanna do both lines here and kind of give you guys a breakdown of the specifics of what I'm doing on the 4-stroke. Let's get into it. Same thing here. Smooth RPM, initiating movement, trying to get off of the clutch. Then we'll reload that RPM right before the waterfall incline. Here we go, smooth delivery. Up on the pegs, reload. Trying to be clean through here. I felt good. Nice and smooth. Downhill, both front and rear, mostly rear on the downhill because the front is so slick. Really holding the clutch in. We don't want to stall the bike. We're going to do a little more technical now. Here's our first stall. Slower entry, and we're going to do this right-handed pivot. Running it deep to here. Remember, we want to set ourselves up nice and straight there. Setting up. I can definitely feel that I need to be on the throttle just a little bit more. The focus here is preventing that bike from stalling as we make those kind of technical moves. Setting myself up, much run in as I can get. Starting hips back, delivering the power, driving forward, releasing and reducing the throttle, trying to hold traction the whole way up. Here we are, hips back. About the same spot. You can see, you might have even heard, I was right on the edge of stalling there. Same thing. There it is, there's your stall. So you can see the biggest thing about a 4-stroke is the descending RPM. The RPMs descend quicker on a 4-stroke, so you need to be more precise with throttle and clutch, and also really focus on almost maintaining throttle all the way through. That being said, when you maintain throttle, you run a higher likelihood of spinning the rear tire on mossy, slick rocks like this one. So we set up again, looking behind me, giving myself the maximum amount of space for momentum. See, I just held on more just so I wouldn't stall there. Nice. Front rear brakes on the downhill, mostly rear here. We're going to try this drier spot. So again, I'm setting up as far back as I can to give me the maximum run-in, maximum momentum for this wall, or for this slab. It is granite, it is somewhat slick. I think the 2-stroke has the best tire setup, to be honest. This one's got a stiffer mousse and a VE33S, good coat on the rear, whereas the 2-stroke has a JX8 140 with a soft mousse, so it's a pretty good setup. Setting myself up here, hips back, driving through, holding back, aiming with my rear. Hopefully I can get my rear all the way up into the next waterfall, essentially. Yeah. Mistake there. Basically, that was just, I mean, I would say that was more tire setup than anything. I could have been maybe a little more aggressive with the power. Let's set up again. All right, we're set up again on this obstacle. It's quite slick already. You know, just that little bit of water on this granite makes it challenging. I have to get a big load of power here, hopefully transition to as minimum as we can, but it's so slick, and I would say my mousse is a little bit too stiff. I tend to spin on top. Had to be way more aggressive with power than on the first run. And I also I moved this way just a little bit in that obstacle, so I wouldn't get caught up on the rear. Four-stroke takes a little more precision to ride in the technical stuff. I also think maybe my suspension's a little stiff for this style. It's just holding me a little too high in the stroke. Great for endurocross, not the best for kind of slick riverbeds when you feel like you're too high up, right? Kind of makes it so you feel like you're gonna fall over. That being said, that felt decent. We're on the right track here. All right, guys, we are on to the start. We're gonna do a little play around on this little waterfall section here, and we're gonna give it a shot. Here we go. Low RPM, power. Yeah, that's nice. Little slip there. Nice. That was pretty clean. You're definitely powering later into each obstacle. So as we said before, on the 2-stroke and the 4-stroke, we build those RPMs and then kind of reduce up the face to hold traction. This one, you're definitely powering into the face of the obstacle and then just chopping and trying to hold a really steady RPM through. But it has such great mapping down in the bottom. It really does track pretty dang well. You're just kind of throttling a little bit later. This thing's a rocket. I mean, it definitely goes up stuff super easy. On the downs, oops, neutral. On the downs, takes getting used to using that rear brake on your left hand, but I mean, it's just as controllable. Like I said, the center of gravity is so low. It really handles the loose baby head rocks really well. And that's, you can feel that on downhills. Let's flip around here. Nice and smooth, run it deep here, just like we did. Low RPM, switch back. Trying to keep traction, trying to keep the weight on the peg. Setting up, back. Make sure I get, as much run in as possible. Kind of have a rock behind me, that's okay. Hips back, stand through. Same understanding here of keeping the weight back and trying to be tractable through this. See, I think I was a little early on the release. Also, every time I try to back up, I'm like grabbing the rear brake like a clutch to try to roll backwards. I'm still just trying to get used to this thing. Not bad. I mean, that's kind of interesting right there. I mean, I think especially in these tight technical situations, I seem to have a hard time being precise. When it's slowed down to a stop, you know, I'm learning something new, which is not having a clutch. When it comes to a stop, that precision kind of goes away for me. You can see I'm a little all over the place. I spun a couple times there, whereas both bikes I held really good traction. It's, I would say, more user error, just me trying to get used to the bike, and switching from bike to bike makes it challenging. I mean, I literally just put, you know, jumping 2-stroke, 4-stroke, then to electric in minutes. It makes it kind of tough to figure out exactly what inputs and where I need to do it. In these tight technical sections, it's a lot about precision. That's why on a 2-stroke, I'm really clean through there, because I've done it 10,000 times. On this is my, you know, 3rd time on the motorcycle. So it's a little more challenging. Let me see if I can turn around here without knocking my camera guy over. Can't. I just don't have the precision. All right, here we go. Let's try that waterfall again. And I'm just trying to give like blips, but I'm having a tough time doing it. Here we go, hips back. Drive first, then release. That was better. It is definitely different changing from bike to bike. That's the biggest issue here. A few runs, I'll get better and better and better. It feels good, honestly. When I got it there, it was like, okay, I'm just timing my movement and timing the throttle just a little bit off. The biggest thing is you have to initiate a lot with body position, then get on the power later. And I keep getting on the power too early. The other thing I'm having a little bit of trouble with is like finding those quick blips to set the bike up and move it from right to left. And I have to figure out how to do that with all throttle rather than clutch and throttle. Taking time doesn't mean it's not possible. Has nothing to do with the bike. It's all me. It just takes time for me to understand how to transition from bike to bike to bike. I don't want you to think that I'm, you know, saying it's not possible on the Stark. It totally is. And it's kind of interesting. We've seen throughout this series places where each bike performs really good. It's like the 4-stroke had its time in a certain place, the 2-stroke had its time in a certain place, and now the Stark has its time in a certain place. So each episode has kind of shown where I'm able to make the quick adaptation or where I haven't been able to make those quick adapting pieces. And that's the thing. It's like, I think you can see when it's really about precision, that's where I'm having the biggest trouble on this. And it's just going to take me a bit to learn exactly how to use brake and throttle to kind of maximize that overall control. Very challenging. You know, this is really fun to try to switch from bike to bike and yeah, test it out. Let's move on to the next section. All right, so this next section here, pretty rocky, pretty loose. There's a lot of like baby head sized rock. And then on the other side of it, it's just slab with moss on it. So you really have to be deliberate with your throttle. Now, each one of these steps, the first one down there, again, I'm thinking about power before. That allows me to build that inertia to then transfer to minimum after I've established that momentum. I've mentioned this before on the channel, but the best riders in the world can transition from maximum to minimum quickly. The quicker you can make that transition, the easier it's going to be for you to establish momentum, then transition to minimum power to maintain tractable momentum. So that transition is very key, and you can hear how I'm doing it. I'm creating that load a little bit with the clutch in, that load of inertia, reduce and release as we come up the face, and then we slip back to very steady. Now, the other thing that I'm trying to do here is, after I establish my momentum, I'm trying to get off my clutch. I said that earlier. This is key here. That keeps your momentum moving and almost puts you in a situation where you're fighting to keep that momentum. Whereas if you're riding your clutch a lot, sometimes you'll have the habit of just pulling it in and losing all of that momentum that you have. Getting off of the clutch will create that ability to hold momentum easier. And we did a video about muddy situations, and that's a key piece for anything that's slick. The hardest part is this little switch that we have to do here. The river kind of runs this way. There's a big knob of slab right kind of in the middle, and I have to go around it and then hit this wall. It's a 2-3 feet wall. The wall itself is not hard, but the run up is the hard part. So I'm actually lifting the front tire very early and almost pivoting, right foot down, pivoting, and then I jump off of my right foot, put it back onto the peg, and drive forward, stepping up above the bike. I actually sometimes will even dab with the left foot up the ledge. So there's an initiation of a clutch up, there's a hold of steady throttle as I ride it into the obstacle. As the front tire drives into the obstacle, I'm also loading the engine to create that inertia and get that propulsion up and over the obstacle. A lot of body position there as well. It's very key that I drive the front tire into the obstacle. That hinders the machine's motion and allows me to move forward, so when I release the clutch, the bike can come out from under me and I can move back holding traction. Let's see if we can do it with no run in here. Right foot on for the initiation. I'll probably go to left foot, dab, pivot, step through, back to left foot as we come up. A lot happening with body position, not to mention throttle and clutch. Pivot, step, nice and smooth. Two-stroke does a great job of that. I mean, it's, you know, obviously I ride a lot of hard enduro out here on this bike, so I'm very used to it. I'm excited to test the four-stroke. I've never rode the KX up this riverbed. So let's get into it. So as you guys could see, the focus is on being very deliberate with the throttle on the four-stroke. If I chop too much, I run a much higher likelihood of stalling. And that's what honestly makes a four-stroke much more challenging to ride in hard enduro. I would say it takes a little bit more setup, a little bit more, you know, mapping and an understanding of how we find that ability to keep the bike from stalling. I have to be more precise with throttle, and I almost have to hold it on all the time. Now, you might be saying, okay, you could raise your idle, or, you know, obviously the more you rev it, the less it's gonna stall. That being said, when you get into slick situations, you don't have that ability to chug down into the bottom of the power where you're looking for that tractable control. And that's why the majority of riders do not ride a four-stroke in hard enduro. Is it possible? Absolutely. With the right setup and the right work, and obviously the right rider, you can make it happen. I said this in a previous episode, and I'll say it again. Johnny Walker just pulled off a 6th place on the Triumph 250 in Ayresburg. So that shows that these bikes are completely capable with the right work, the right rider. You know, you just have to focus a little more and make adjustments within yourself to be able to keep that bike running, keep that bike tractable, and keep it controlled in these tight technical situations. Now, this bike was the fastest on Endurocross, but in hard enduro, it's just a little bit of a change and a little bit of an adaptation that I have to make on the machine to make sure that I can keep my momentum, keep my movement, and not stall. So that's pretty interesting. Those 2 sections were awesome. Now it's time to get on the Stark and feel it out in the riverbeds. So through this top section, I'm really focused on throttle control. As I mentioned earlier, we were able to turn the power down to about 25 horsepower. And that allowed for significantly more traction in that lower section. I also turned the regenerative braking down to 20. And the reason I turned it down so much is every time I would chop the throttle in this section, I could feel the rear tire almost locking and sliding. So every time you're chopping, it goes into that regenerative braking, and then you have to get on it again, and that's making it kind of the same as like being on the clutch constantly on a 2-stroke or 4-stroke. It increases the likelihood of you breaking traction. So turning that down, that allowed me to kind of have a little bit more free speed, coasting through each of these little sections, and allowed me to be more gentle on the throttle. Gentle throttle is so key here. Something that's awesome about this bike is you can hear the rear tire. So you know if you're holding traction or if you're spinning, and that's something that helps a lot. You're focused on that kind of low RPM, and every time it spins, you have that ability to chop. You can hear and feel the rear tire break loose. The cool thing is, you know, the ability to change maps. You know, I could run it in 25 for riverbeds, and then if I have a hill climb, turn it up to 40 and climb it. Or depending on how big the hill is, you got all the horsepower you want. It's really cool to be able to change on the fly. Something I'm really focused on this bike is, I mean, honestly, I'm focused on it on every bike, but almost more on this one because I'm so deliberate with the throttle. I'm really thinking about pressing through whatever foot is on the peg. So I'm really putting all of my weight on that foot that's on the peg as I dab lightly on the other side. The more pressure I feel I can put through the foot peg, the better the bike kind of tracks and moves forward, which is the same on any bike. But it almost opened the door for me to realize how much I was pressing through the peg on this bike because I'm so focused on the throttle, if that makes sense. So it's one of those things, it's taking time to adapt to. Definitely, you know, pretty impressed with the hard enduro aspects of the bike. It definitely has the ability to track as good or better than any bike, just because you have such a long field of power and an adjustability within the power. This section, I felt like I was straightening it out more on this bike, and that could be the weight. It does feel like the weight is much lower, and it feels like almost the linkage is higher on this. There seems like there's almost more clearance on this bike than on the other one. So that's kind of interesting as well. Here we go. Let's see if we can get up this clean. Like, I actually screwed that up and I still was able to hold traction on the top. This is great. I mean, I feel pretty solid. I mean, I could have done that better, but one of those things, you know, it's like the constant practice on this thing is I think, going to make a huge difference, just like on any bike. That being said, I think the barrier here, the barrier of entry is lower. There's so much precision that goes into throttle and clutch control. I'm constantly focused on that feed, and in a lot of places I love that. I love that ability to modulate how much power I'm putting out with two forms of control, clutch and throttle, right? That's an extra piece to a combustion bike, but it's a piece that can create more tractable control. That being said, you can see where technology is going. It's getting so good, and they've really worked on making this bike suitable in hard enduro situations. And I think the more I ride it, the more I'm gonna adapt to it. We'll probably put out an episode here of just a live helmet cam, me hammering my loop out here, and just kind of talking you guys through what I'm feeling, and that'll be kind of fun later on. But this series has been a lot of fun. I think next week we're gonna get into a little hill climb. We're gonna get into the steeper sections. I haven't really done a solid like switchback on this, so that'll be interesting to talk about. I hope you guys are enjoying all the stuff that we're putting out. Let us know in the comments what you'd like to see. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at IRC Moto. My personal Instagram page at RichLarson511. Get at one of the clinics all around the US. I hope to see you there. I hope you're enjoying the channel. Until next time, keep shredding.